There is something happening inside your body right now that you have been told is impossible. Not difficult, not unlikely, impossible. And the reason you believe it is impossible is not because the evidence supports that conclusion. It is because you were handed a story about your body at some point in your life. A story that felt like biology, felt like science, felt like settled fact. And you accepted it the way you accept the floor beneath your feet, without questioning whether the floor is the whole structure or just the surface of something much deeper. The story goes like this. You are born, you grow, you peak, somewhere in your late teens or early 20s, and then the long, slow arc of decline begins. Your metabolism slows, your cells divide less efficiently, your hormones drop, your tissues lose their elasticity. The machine winds down. This is what you were taught. This is what most people carry as bedrock truth about the human body. But here is what that story leaves out. Beneath the surface of your biology, beneath the cellular machinery you were taught about in school, there is a layer of organization that does not follow the rules of decline. It follows the rules of information. And information, unlike tissue, does not age the way you think it does. What if the body you remember, the one with the energy that felt inexhaustible, the one that healed overnight, the one that moved without the weight of accumulated time? What if that body was not something you lost? What if it was something you drifted away from, like a signal that is still broadcasting, still present, still coherent, waiting beneath the frequency you settled into? That is not a metaphor designed to make you feel better. That is a description of something specific that is happening at the molecular level of your cells right now. Something that researchers have been uncovering with increasing precision over the last 2 decades. Something that ancient traditions encoded into their practices long before the instruments existed to measure it. Today, we are going beneath the story you were given about your body and its relationship with time. We are going beneath the surface explanation, beneath the biology you learned in school, beneath even the quantum mechanics of cellular regeneration, all the way to the layer where the body's relationship with aging is not a fixed fact, but a tunable signal. And by the time we reach that layer, you will understand something that most people never get to see. Not because it was hidden from them, but because they stopped at the surface. Let us begin with what you actually know about your body. You know it changes. You have watched it change. There are things it did at 17 that it does not do at 35, or 45, or 55. Recovery takes longer. Sleep feels different. The mirror shows you something that moves in one direction. This is the surface layer of your experience, and it is real. We are not going to pretend it is not there. But here is the first hidden layer beneath it. The changes you have observed in your body are not the same thing as the changes that are actually occurring in your biology. They are the downstream expression of something happening much further upstream. And the distance between the surface expression and the upstream cause is enormous. It is in that distance that everything interesting lives. Your body is not aging because time is passing. Your body is aging because of specific, measurable, and in many cases, reversible changes in how your cells read their own instruction manual. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this entire transmission, so let me be precise about it. Every cell in your body contains the same DNA, the same complete blueprint that was present in the cells of your teenage body is present in your cells right now. The blueprint did not degrade. The information did not disappear. What changed was not the instructions themselves, but which instructions are being read and how loudly. This is epigenetics, and it is the first veil that lifts when you look beneath the surface story of aging. The word epigenetics comes from the Greek prefix epi, meaning above or upon. Epigenetics is the layer of biological control that sits above the genetic code itself, the system that decides which genes get expressed and which remain silent. Think of your DNA as a vast library containing millions of books. Epigenetics is the librarian who decides which books are pulled from the shelves and read aloud and which remain closed, gathering what looks like dust but is actually just waiting. If this is landing for you at a level that wants to go further, here is something I want to offer you.
Have you spent years trying every surface fix, therapy, mindset work, manifestation, habit redesign, and the same patterns keep coming back in different clothes? Every one of those tools is working on belief and behavior. The actual pattern was installed deeper than any of them can reach. Beneath the veil, a quantum map of reality's hidden layers walks through the full 5-layer descent. The surface reality you were handed, the layer where the pattern was actually installed, the physics underneath that, the ancient traditions that mapped the same thing thousands of years ago, and what you actually are at the bottom of all of it. This is the layer that therapy, mindset work, and manifestation could never reach. The longer you keep working the surface, the longer that deeper layer keeps generating the same life. So do this one tonight. It's waiting in the pinned comment below.
Now let us return to the library of your own biology and the librarian who has been choosing your books. In your teenage body, certain books were open. Genes associated with cellular repair, with growth hormone production, with mitochondrial efficiency, with the synthesis of proteins that keep tissue supple and responsive. These were being read constantly, loudly, repeatedly. Your cells were in a state of high biological expression that felt, from the inside, like inexhaustible energy. What happened as you moved through your 20s, 30s, and beyond was not that those books were destroyed. They were shelved, closed. The librarian, responding to signals from your environment, your stress levels, your sleep patterns, your nutrition, your beliefs about what your body should be doing at your age, began pulling different books. The instruction set shifted. And here is what makes this the first genuinely important thing you need to understand about the layer beneath your surface experience of aging. Epigenetic changes are not permanent in the way genetic mutations are. A mutation changes the text of the book. An epigenetic change closes the book or opens it. And what closes can be opened. What was silenced can be expressed again. This is not speculation. This is the direction that the most significant research in molecular biology has been pointing for the last 20 years. Scientists working in the field of epigenetic reprogramming have demonstrated in laboratory settings that aged cells can be returned to a state of youthful gene expression, not theoretically, in practice. The cells of old mice have been reprogrammed to express the patterns of young mice, with measurable restoration of tissue function. The work of researchers like David Sinclair at Harvard, who has spent decades investigating the information theory of aging, points to something that sounds almost too strange to be science, but is documented in peer-reviewed journals. Aging is, at its core, a loss of epigenetic information, not a loss of genetic information. The blueprint is intact. What is being lost is the fidelity of the reading system, the clarity with which the cell accesses its own instructions. And if aging is an information problem, then it has an information solution. Here is something that sits just beneath the epigenetics layer, something that most people who encounter this research miss because they stop at the headline. The epigenetic changes that accumulate with age are not random. They are patterned. They follow a sequence. Specific genes are silenced in a specific order, and specific genes are activated in a specific order, and that order is consistent enough across individuals that scientists can use it to calculate your biological age with the accuracy of a clock. This means aging is not chaos. It is a program, and programs, unlike entropy, have inputs. Programs respond to information. Programs can be interrupted, modified, and in some cases reversed. The specific mechanism that drives much of this epigenetic drift is DNA methylation. Methyl groups, small molecular tags, attach to specific sites on the DNA strand and silence the genes at those sites. In young cells, the methylation pattern is clean and precise, like a well-maintained filing system, where everything is exactly where it should be. As cells age, the methylation pattern becomes noisier. Methyl groups accumulate in places they should not be and disappear from places where they are needed. The filing system becomes disordered. The librarian starts pulling the wrong books, but the disorder is not irreversible. Researchers have found specific interventions, including particular nutritional compounds, specific exercise patterns, and targeted meditative practices that can restore methylation patterns toward the profile of younger cells. The filing system can be reorganized, the librarian can be retrained, and the books that were shelved, the ones encoding the biological programs of your teenage body, can be pulled from the shelves and read again. If what we are uncovering here is landing for you, take a second to like this video and subscribe so these deeper layers keep reaching you. But we are not stopping at epigenetics. That is still a surface layer compared to what lies beneath it. Because the question that epigenetics raises is this: what controls the epigenetic librarian? What sends the signals that decide which genes get expressed? Peel back the epigenetic layer and look at what is underneath. Beneath the gene expression layer, beneath the molecular switches that turn your biological programs on and off, there is a field of communication that your cells are embedded in and constantly responding to. And this is where the quantum layer begins to show itself. Your cells do not make decisions in isolation. They are not independent units running their own programs. They are nodes in a biological field, constantly sending and receiving information through mechanisms that operate at the quantum scale, at the level where the classical rules of cause and effect begin to blur, and something stranger takes over. Let me be specific about what I mean by quantum in a biological context, because this word gets used loosely in ways that obscure more than they reveal. Quantum biology is a real and growing field of scientific research. It is not metaphor. It is not spirituality dressed in scientific language. It is the study of quantum mechanical processes that have been documented to operate inside living systems. Photosynthesis, for example, has been shown to use quantum coherence, a phenomenon where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously, to achieve near-perfect efficiency in transferring energy from light to chemical reactions. This was a discovery that shocked biologists because quantum coherence was thought to be too fragile to survive in the warm, wet, noisy environment of a living cell. It turns out living cells have evolved to exploit quantum effects, not despite their complexity, but because of it. The same quantum coherence that operates in photosynthesis has been proposed as a mechanism in enzyme function, in DNA mutation and repair, in the navigation systems of birds, and in the operation of your own sensory systems. Your sense of smell, for instance, may work not through a simple lock and key mechanism of molecular shape recognition, but through quantum tunneling, where electrons pass through molecular barriers in ways that classical physics says should be impossible. Your body is already operating at the quantum level. It has always been operating at the quantum level. The surface story of biology, the one where cells are tiny machines following chemical instructions, is the outermost layer of what is actually happening. Beneath the chemical layer, beneath the molecular layer, beneath even the atomic layer of your biology, your cells are participating in processes where the normal rules about what is fixed and what is fluid, what is determined and what is possible, do not apply in the way you were taught. And here is why this matters for the question of your teenage body. In quantum mechanics, the state of a system is not fixed until it is observed. Before measurement, a quantum system exists in superposition, a simultaneous presence of multiple possible states. The act of observation, the interaction with the measuring system, is what collapses the superposition into a single outcome. Your cells are biological measuring systems. They are constantly collapsing quantum possibilities into biological actualities, and the state they collapse into is influenced by the information field they are embedded in, which includes your nervous system, your immune system, your endocrine system, and, at a level that most biology textbooks do not yet fully account for, your attention and your belief about what your body is doing. This is not the claim that thinking happy thoughts cures disease. That is a distortion of something much more precise. The claim is that the information environment your cells operate in, which includes the neurochemical signals generated by your mental and emotional states, directly influences the epigenetic expression of your cells, which directly influences the biological age they express. The mechanism runs like this. Chronic stress, for example, generate sustained cortisol production. Sustained cortisol production accelerates telomere shortening, which is one of the primary molecular markers of cellular aging. It also suppresses the expression of genes associated with cellular repair and regeneration. The psychological state of chronic stress literally ages the cell at the molecular level. This is not metaphor. This is documented in the research of scientists like Elizabeth Blackburn, who won the Nobel Prize for her work on telomeres and their relationship to cellular aging. Now run that mechanism in reverse. States of deep physiological coherence, states associated with what researchers call the relaxation response, with meditation, with practices that reduce the stress hormone load on the body. These states have been shown to lengthen telomeres, to upregulate the expression of repair genes, to shift the epigenetic profile of cells toward patterns associated with younger biological age. The body you had at 17 was not just running on different hormones, it was running on a different information environment. And that information environment is not permanently inaccessible to you. It is beneath the surface of the one you are currently operating in. Let me go one layer deeper into the telomere story, because it is more remarkable than the headline version. Telomeres are the protective caps at the ends of your chromosomes, like the plastic tips at the ends of shoelaces. Every time a cell divides, the telomeres get slightly shorter. When they become too short, the cell can no longer divide and enters a state called senescence, a kind of cellular retirement, where it stops functioning optimally and begins releasing inflammatory signals that accelerate aging in surrounding tissue. Telomere shortening is one of the primary clocks of cellular aging, and it was long assumed to be a strictly one-directional process. The caps shorten. They do not lengthen. The clock ticks forward. It does not tick back. But Elizabeth Blackburn's Nobel Prize-winning work was not just about telomeres. It was about the enzyme that maintains them. Telomerase. And telomerase is the layer beneath the surface story of inevitable telomere shortening. Telomerase is an enzyme that can rebuild telomeres. It adds the repeating sequences back to the ends of chromosomes, restoring their length and extending the cellular lifespan. In the cells of your teenage body, telomerase was highly active. The caps were being maintained, and in some cases extended as fast as they were being worn. The clock was not ticking forward, because the maintenance crew was keeping pace with the wear. What changed was not that telomerase disappeared. It is still present in your cells. What changed was its level of activity, which is, again, an epigenetic regulation. The gene encoding telomerase is silenced more aggressively as the body receives the signals associated with aging. Chronic stress silences it. Sleep deprivation silences it. Inflammatory nutrition silences it. And the accumulated story of being a body that is past its peak silences it at the identity layer in ways that cascade downward through all the other layers. But telomerase activity can be restored. Blackburn's own research, and the work of researchers who followed her, has documented that meditation, specifically practices that reduce psychological stress and increase what researchers call psychological well-being, can measurably increase telomerase activity. not in a marginal way, in a clinically significant way. The cells of experienced meditators show telomere lengths and telomerase activity levels that correspond to biological ages significantly younger than their chronological ages. The maintenance crew can be called back. The clock does not just slow, it can be partially reversed. Pause for a moment and drop into this question. Has there been a moment in your own life when you suddenly saw through a story your body had been living inside, when something you always sensed beneath the surface finally became visible? Leave it in the comments. What was the hidden layer you found? But there is a layer beneath even this, and it is the one that the ancient traditions mapped before the instruments existed to measure it. Let me show you what they found. Across cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, there is a remarkably consistent account of something that the surface story of biology entirely omits. The traditions of Ayurveda, of Taoist medicine, of the yogic lineages of India, of the shamanic traditions of indigenous cultures across multiple continents, all describe the human body as having a layer of organization that precedes and underlies the physical tissue. In Ayurveda, this is called prana, the vital force that animates matter. In Taoist medicine, it is qi or qi, the life energy that flows through channels in the body called meridians. In the yogic tradition, it is described as the pranamaya kosha, the energy body that interpenetrates the physical body and serves as its organizational template. In the shamanic traditions, it is the luminous body, the field of light that surrounds and informs the physical form. These are not identical concepts. Each tradition has its own nuances, its own map of the hidden layer, but the structural claim they share is this: the physical body is not the primary body. It is the densest, most visible expression of a more fundamental layer of organization. And the health, vitality, and apparent age of the physical body is downstream of the state of that underlying layer. For most of the modern era, this was dismissed as pre-scientific mythology. The body is chemistry. The chemistry is controlled by genetics. There is no energy body. There is no field of prana or qi. These are useful metaphors at best, superstition at worst. And then science started measuring what it had previously declared unmeasurable. The discovery of biophotons is one of the most significant and least discussed findings in modern biology. Biophotons are photons of light that are emitted by living cells. They were first documented by the Russian biologist Alexander Gurevich in the 1920s, dismissed by the mainstream, and then rediscovered and rigorously measured by the German biophysicist Fritz Albert Popp beginning in the 1970s. Popp found that living cells emit a coherent field of light, not the random photon emission you would expect from thermal radiation. Coherent light, meaning the photons are phase correlated. They are organized in a way that is analogous to laser light, rather than the scattered light of a light bulb. And this coherent biophoton field is not a byproduct of cellular metabolism. It appears to function as a communication system, a field of information that coordinates cellular activity across the entire organism. Healthy cells emit coherent biophoton fields. Diseased cells emit chaotic biophoton fields. Young cells emit different biophoton patterns than old cells. The field is not separate from the biology. It is the organizational layer beneath the biology. What the ancient traditions called prana, what Taoist medicine called qi, what the shamanic traditions called the luminous body, may be, at least in part, a description of this biophoton field, a layer of coherent light that organizes and informs the physical tissue from beneath. And if that is the case, then the ancient practices designed to cultivate and restore this energy body were not metaphorical. They were targeting a real layer of biological organization that modern science is only now beginning to measure. This is where the veil between ancient wisdom and quantum biology becomes almost transparent. The practices of pranayama, the yogic breathing techniques that are thousands of years old, are described in the ancient texts as techniques for increasing and directing prana, the vital force. From the surface, they are breathing exercises. Beneath that surface, they are protocols for altering the information environment of your cells. The specific patterns of breath retention and release in pranayama techniques have been shown in modern research to directly modulate the autonomic nervous system, shift the hormonal environment of the body, alter gene expression, and change the coherence of the biophoton field. The ancient practitioners did not have the vocabulary of quantum biology, but they had the map. They had found the hidden layer through direct experience and had encoded the path to it in practices that still work today, not because they are mystical, but because they are precise. There is one specific pranayama technique that illustrates this more sharply than most. It is called Nadi Shodhana, or alternate nostril breathing, and it has been practiced in the yogic tradition for at least 2,000 years. The practice involves closing one nostril while breathing through the other, alternating sides in a specific rhythm. The ancient texts describe it as a technique for balancing the two primary channels of prana in the body, the Ida and the Pingala, the cooling and the heating currents that the tradition maps along the left and right sides of the spine. Modern neuroscience has found something remarkable about this practice. The two nostrils are connected to opposite hemispheres of the brain through the olfactory system. Breathing predominantly through the left nostril activates the right hemisphere and the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and repair branch. Breathing predominantly through the right nostril activates the left hemisphere and the sympathetic nervous system, the activation branch. Alternate nostril breathing rhythmically shifts activation between these two systems, producing a state of balanced hemispheric coherence that is measurably different from either activation or rest alone. In this state of balanced coherence, the body's stress hormone production drops, growth hormone production increases, and the epigenetic environment shifts toward the patterns associated with cellular repair and youthful gene expression. The ancient map of Ida and Pingala is, beneath the surface of its mythological language, a precise description of the autonomic nervous system and its relationship to biological age regulation. The mystics were not describing metaphysics, they were describing physiology. They just did not have the vocabulary for it yet. Now I want to tell you about someone. His name was Elias, and he was 43 years old when he found the letter. It was in a box his mother had given him after clearing out the family home, a box of things from his childhood. And in that box, beneath old school reports and photographs he barely recognized, was a letter he had written to himself at 17. His mother had asked him to write it, as part of some school exercise he had long forgotten. The instruction had been, "Describe yourself as you are right now, not who you want to be, who you are." Elias sat in his kitchen and read what 17-year-old him had written. He wrote about his energy, about how he would wake up in the morning already in motion, already thinking, already wanting. He wrote about how his body felt like something he inhabited completely, something that responded to him without negotiation. He wrote about the sense, which he described with the clumsy vocabulary of a teenager, that anything was possible, not as a platitude, but as a felt reality, a physical sensation of openness that lived in his chest. Elias read this and felt something he had not expected. Not nostalgia, not grief. Something stranger than either of those. He felt recognition, as if the 17-year-old describing that body was describing something that was still present. Not in the past, but beneath the present. Like a signal he had drifted away from, but that had never stopped broadcasting. He put the letter down and sat with that feeling for a long time. And then he did something that seemed small, but was not. He asked himself a question he had never thought to ask. Not, how do I get back to that? That is the question of someone who believes the thing is lost. The question he asked was, where is it? Not where was it? Where is it? Because if the biological blueprint is intact, if the epigenetic information is still present in the cell, if the biophoton field is still organized beneath the surface of what the mirror shows, then the teenage body is not somewhere in the past. It is somewhere beneath the present. It is a layer of the body that currently exists, currently broadcasts, currently waits for the conditions that will allow it to be expressed again. Elias did not find a program. He did not find a protocol. He found a different question. And the different question changed what he was looking for. And what you look for determines what you find. Not as metaphor, as the most basic principle of how attention shapes biological reality. Over the next 2 years, Elias made changes that were not dramatic in isolation, but were radical in combination. He began sleeping differently, not longer, but with more attention to the conditions that allowed deep sleep, the phase of sleep where growth hormone is released and cellular repair accelerates. He changed how he ate, not according to a diet, but according to the question of what information this food is sending to my cells. He began a breathing practice, not because he understood the biophoton field, but because something in the ancient description of prana resonated with what he had felt reading his own letter. He began moving his body in ways that felt like the movement of someone who inhabited their body completely, not the movement of someone managing a declining machine. None of this was revolutionary. All of it was available. What changed was the layer he was operating from. He had stopped relating to his body from the surface story and started relating to it from the layer beneath. The layer where the information was still intact, where the blueprint had never been erased, where the teenage body was not a memory, but a signal. 3 years after finding the letter, Elias had his biological age tested using epigenetic clocks, the modern tools that measure the methylation patterns of your DNA to estimate cellular age. His chronological age was 46. His biological age was 31. The surface story says this is impossible. The layer beneath the surface story says this is precisely what happens when you stop sending the signals that tell your cells to age and start sending the signals that tell your cells to repair, regenerate, and return to the expression patterns of a younger biological state. Elias was not exceptional. He was paying attention to a different layer. Now let us go to the practice, because none of this is useful if it stays in the abstract. The veil does not lift through understanding alone. It lifts through direct experience of the layer beneath. I want you to do something right now, not later, now. Bring your attention to your body, not to what it looks like, not to how it compares to what it looked like 10 or 20 years ago. Bring your attention to the sensation of being in your body right now, in this moment. Feel the breath moving in and out. Feel the temperature of the air. Feel the weight of your body against whatever surface is supporting you. Feel the subtle pulse of circulation, the aliveness that is present in your tissue right now, without you doing anything to create it. Now I want you to go one layer deeper. Beneath the sensations you just noticed, beneath the mechanical experience of breathing and circulation, there is something else. It is harder to describe because it is not a sensation in the ordinary sense. It is more like a quality of the space your awareness occupies inside your body. A kind of luminosity, or readiness, or potential. Something that is not doing anything, but is available for everything. This is what the ancient traditions were pointing at when they talked about prana, about chi, about the vital force. Not the breathing, not the heartbeat, the layer beneath those, the organizational field that the breathing and heartbeat are expressions of. Stay with that layer for a moment. Do not try to change it or amplify it. Just notice that it is there. Just acknowledge that beneath the surface experience of your body, beneath the biology you can measure and the chemistry you can test, there is a field of organization that has been present since before you were born and has never stopped being present. Now from that layer, I want you to do something specific. Recall a moment from your teenage body. Not the appearance, the felt sense, the quality of energy in the morning, the way your body responded to movement, the sense of being fully inhabited, fully present in your physical form. Do not reach for it as a memory. Reach for it as a signal. Because if the epigenetic information is still present in your cells, if the biophoton field still carries the pattern of that younger biological state, then what you are reaching for is not in the past. It is beneath the present. And the act of reaching for it, of directing your attention toward that layer, is not a nostalgic exercise. It is a biological signal. Your attention is information. Your nervous system responds to the direction of your attention by adjusting its neurochemical output. The neurochemical output influences the hormonal environment. The hormonal environment influences epigenetic expression. The epigenetic expression influences which version of your biological self your cells are currently building toward. This is the mechanism. It is not magic. It is the information architecture of your own biology. Hold that felt sense for 30 seconds. Breathe into it. Let your nervous system register it not as a memory, but as a present tense state. And notice what happens in your body when you do. Something shifts. It may be subtle. It may be something you almost dismiss as imagination. Do not dismiss it. That shift is the membrane between the surface layer of your biological story and the layer beneath it becoming thinner. That is what the veil thinning feels like from the inside. Now let us go deeper still. Because beneath the epigenetics, beneath the biophoton field, beneath even the quantum biology, there is a layer that the most cutting-edge research in the science of aging is only now beginning to approach, and it is a layer that the ancient traditions described with startling precision. It is the layer of biological time itself. Your cells have a clock. This is not a metaphor. It is a molecular mechanism called the epigenetic clock, and it was discovered by the biostatistician Steve Horvath at UCLA in 2013. Horvath found that by measuring the methylation patterns at specific sites across the genome, you could calculate the biological age of a cell with remarkable precision. The clock works across different tissue types, across different individuals, across different species. It is one of the most accurate biological age predictors ever discovered. But here is the layer beneath the discovery that most people stop at. The epigenetic clock is not just a measurement tool. It is a description of a real biological mechanism. Your cells are not just aging, they are keeping time. There is an active molecular process in your cells that is tracking biological age, and that process is regulated by the same epigenetic machinery that responds to your environment, your behavior, your stress levels, and your physiological state. This means that biological time is not fixed. It is regulated, and what is regulated can be modulated. Horvath himself has been involved in research showing that certain interventions can turn back the epigenetic clock. Not slow it, turn it back. The Yamanaka factors, a set of 4 genes identified by the Japanese researcher Shinya Yamanaka, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering them, can reprogram adult cells back to a stem cell-like state, erasing the epigenetic marks of aging and restoring the gene expression patterns of a younger cell. The challenge with the original Yamanaka approach was that full reprogramming erased not just the age markers, but also the cell's identity. You turned a liver cell back into a stem cell, which is not useful if you want a liver. But subsequent research has found that partial reprogramming, cycling the Yamanaka factors briefly rather than continuously, can reset the epigenetic age markers without erasing cell identity. The cell remembers what it is. It just forgets how old it is. This is extraordinary. Your cells have a memory of youth that is distinct from their memory of identity. and that memory of youth can be accessed without destroying the cell's functional identity. The teenage body is encoded in your cells, not just as a past state, but as an accessible reference point that the cell's own reprogramming machinery can return to. There is something else encoded in the Yamanaka discovery that the surface reading misses. The 4 factors that Yamanaka identified, known in the literature as OCT4, SOX2, KLF4, and c-MYC, are transcription factors. They are proteins that bind to DNA and change which genes are expressed. They do not rewrite the genetic code, they change what is read from it. They are, in the most precise sense, epigenetic signals. They are information that tells the cell to access a different layer of its own blueprint. And here is what that means for the question of the teenage body. The biological program of youth is not something that exists only in young cells. It is something that all cells retain the capacity to access. It is a layer of the cellular instruction set that is not deleted with age. It is silenced. And the Yamanaka factors are, at the molecular level, the signal that says, read the earlier layer again. Return to the version of this instruction set that was active before the aging program accumulated its overlays. The science is pointing at exactly what the ancient traditions pointed at. The body contains a memory of its own youth. That memory is not in the past, it is in the depth. Now here is where the ancient layer beneath this science becomes genuinely astonishing. The yogic tradition has a concept called Kaya Kalpa, which translates roughly as body transformation or body renewal. It is described in texts that are thousands of years old as a practice for reversing the aging process, for returning the body to a state of youthful vitality, not through external intervention, but through a specific protocol of internal practices that include deep meditation, pranayama, dietary practices, and what the texts call the withdrawal of prana from the surface of the body and its redirection toward the internal organs and glands. From the surface, this sounds like mythology. From the layer beneath, it sounds like a description of partial cellular reprogramming, achieved through the manipulation of the body's own information systems. The withdrawal of prana from the surface of the body and its redirection inward is a description of something that has a measurable physiological correlate. During deep meditative states, blood flow redistributes. The peripheral circulation, the surface of the body, receives less blood, while the internal organs and endocrine glands receive more. This redistribution changes the hormonal environment of the body's core systems, including the pituitary gland, which is the master regulator of the endocrine system and the primary driver of growth hormone production. Growth hormone is one of the most significant biological signals associated with youth. It drives cellular repair, protein synthesis, fat metabolism, and tissue regeneration. Its production peaks in adolescence and declines with age, but the decline is not fixed. It is responsive to the conditions of the body's internal environment. Deep sleep, high-intensity movement, fasting, and specific meditative states all stimulate growth hormone release. The ancient Kaya Kalpa practices, stripped of their mythological framing, are a protocol for creating the internal conditions that maximize the body's own production of the signals associated with youthful biological expression. The mystics did not have the vocabulary of endocrinology, but they had the map. And the map still works. Let me show you another layer beneath this. There is a concept in quantum field theory called the zero-point field. It is the lowest possible energy state of a quantum mechanical system. But here is the strange thing about zero-point energy. It is not zero. Even at absolute zero temperature, where all classical motion stops, quantum systems retain a residual energy. The vacuum of space is not empty. It is seething with quantum fluctuations, a field of potential that underlies all of physical reality. The physicist Hal Puthoff at the University of Texas has proposed that the zero-point field is not just a background curiosity of quantum mechanics, but a fundamental source of the energy that drives biological processes. The idea is that living systems are not closed thermodynamic systems running down toward entropy. They are open systems that interact with the zero-point field, drawing organizational energy from the quantum vacuum to maintain their coherence and complexity. This is a controversial proposal, not yet mainstream, but it points towards something that the ancient traditions described with remarkable consistency. The body is not a closed system running on a fixed fuel supply. It is an open system embedded in a field of infinite potential, and the degree to which it can draw on that field depends on its coherence, its organizational integrity, its ability to maintain the quantum scale order that allows it to interact with the deeper layer of reality. The ancient descriptions of prana, of chi, of the vital force, consistently describe it as something that flows from a universal source into the individual body. Not something the body generates internally, but something the body receives from a field that is larger than the body. The practices designed to cultivate prana are described not as ways of creating energy, but as ways of removing the obstructions that prevent the body from receiving the energy that is always available. If the zero-point field hypothesis has merit, then what the ancient traditions were describing as the flow of prana may be, at the quantum level, the body's interaction with the zero-point field. And the practices they developed for enhancing this flow may be protocols for increasing the body's quantum coherence, its ability to maintain the organized, phase-correlated state that allows it to draw on the deeper field. The teenage body, in this framework, is not just a biological state. It is a state of quantum coherence, a state in which the body's organizational field is highly ordered, highly responsive, highly connected to the deeper field of potential that underlies all physical reality. And the drift toward aging is not just a biological process. It is a drift toward decoherence, toward the loss of the quantum scale organization that keeps the body's information systems running with the clarity and efficiency of youth. And decoherence, like epigenetic change, is not a one-way street. This is the layer that most people never reach, not because it is hidden by conspiracy or withheld by authority, but because the surface story is so convincing, so reinforced by everything around you, that most people never think to look beneath it. The story that aging is inevitable, irreversible, and beyond your influence is the thinnest surface stretched over something much more interesting. I want to tell you about one more person before we go to the deepest layer, Her name was Mara, and she was a researcher. Not in biology, in linguistics. She spent her career studying the way language shapes perception, the way the words you use to describe your experience actually change what you experience. And one day, while reading a paper on the placebo effect, she stumbled across a study that stopped her completely. The study was about hotel housekeepers. A group of researchers had told one group of housekeepers that their daily work, the cleaning, the lifting, the physical activity of their job, counted as exercise and met the recommendations for an active lifestyle. They told a control group nothing. They measured both groups before and after, not their behavior, which did not change, but their biology. The group that was told their work counted as exercise lost weight, reduced their blood pressure, improved their body mass index, and showed changes in their blood chemistry. The control group showed none of these changes. The work was identical. The biology was different. Mara read this and understood something that her linguistics background made vivid for her. The story you tell about your body is not just a story. It is a signal. It is information that your body receives and responds to at the cellular level. The housekeepers who were told they were exercising sent a different information signal to their cells than the housekeepers who were told nothing, and their cells responded differently. She began to look at the language she used about her own body. Not her beliefs exactly, but her language. The offhand comments, the sighs in front of the mirror, the way she described her energy in conversation. I am exhausted. My body is not what it used to be. I cannot recover the way I did when I was young. She had been sending these as signals to her cells for years without knowing it. Every one of them was information. Every one of them was an instruction. She began to change the language, not to affirmations, not to positive thinking, to precision. Instead of, I am exhausted, she began saying, my body is in a repair cycle right now. Instead of I cannot recover the way I used to, she began asking, what does my body need to access its repair capacity? Instead of my body is not what it used to be, she began saying, my body contains the blueprint of everything it has ever been. The language shift was not magic. It was information hygiene. It was changing the signal she was sending to her cells from instructions that reinforced decoherence and epigenetic aging to instructions that pointed toward coherence and regenerative expression. Within a year, Mara's sleep had improved significantly. Her inflammation markers, which she had been monitoring for an unrelated health study, had dropped. Her energy levels had changed in ways that she described not as feeling younger, but as feeling more present, more fully inhabited in her body. The way she had felt, she realized, when she was 17. She had not found a new technology. She had found a different layer of the one she was already living in. Think about this in your own life. What is a pattern you had accepted as fixed about your body? A story that felt like biology, that dissolved the moment you looked at it directly. Drop that in the comments. These moments of recognition matter, and this community is deepened by them. Now we are going to the deepest layer, the one that everything else has been leading toward. Beneath the epigenetics, beneath the biophoton field, beneath the quantum coherence, beneath the zero-point field, there is a layer that is not biological at all, and yet it is the layer from which all biology arises. It is the layer of identity. Here is what I mean by that, and I want to be precise, because this is where the deepest veil lifts. Your body does not age because time passes. Your body ages because of a specific biological mechanism, yes, but that mechanism is downstream of something even more fundamental. The story your identity tells about what your body is supposed to be doing at your age. This is not a claim that you can think your way out of aging. It is a claim that your identity, the deep, often unconscious model you carry of who you are and what your body is, functions as the master signal that all other biological signals are downstream of. Here is the evidence for this that is most difficult to dismiss. There is a documented medical phenomenon called the anniversary reaction, where patients with certain conditions reliably experience symptom flares or health crises around the anniversary of a significant event, a trauma, a loss, a diagnosis. The body keeps its own calendar. It responds to temporal and contextual signals in ways that are not explained by the mechanical biology alone. The body is responding to the story of time. There is the documented phenomenon of multiple personality disorder, now called dissociative identity disorder, where different personality states in the same body can have different physiological profiles, different eye prescriptions, different allergic responses, different blood glucose patterns, the same body, different identities, different biologies. The identity layer is not downstream of the biology. In some cases, it appears to be upstream of it. There is the documented research on subjective age, the age you feel yourself to be, which is consistently a better predictor of health outcomes, longevity, and biological age markers than chronological age. People who feel younger than their chronological age live longer, stay healthier, and show younger epigenetic profiles than people who feel their age or older than their age. Subjective age is not just a psychological curiosity, it is a biological signal. There is also a study from the work of the psychologist Ellen Langer at Harvard that is among the most striking pieces of evidence for the identity layer's influence on biological age. In the late 1970s, Langer took a group of men in their 70s and 80s and immersed them for 1 week in an environment designed to recreate the sensory and social world of 20 years earlier. The newspapers, the music, the television programs, the conversations, everything in the environment signaled to these men that it was 1959, and they were in their 50s. They were not asked to pretend or to act. They were simply immersed in the information environment of a younger version of themselves. After 1 week, the men showed measurable improvements in physical strength, posture, gait, dexterity, vision, hearing, and cognitive performance. Independent raters shown photographs taken before and after the week, without knowing which was which, consistently judged the after photographs to show younger-looking men. the body had responded to the identity signal of the environment. It had begun to express the biological patterns appropriate to the age the environment was describing. This is the identity layer in operation, not as metaphor, as documented, measurable biological fact. The deepest layer of the aging process is not cellular, it is not molecular, it is not even quantum. It is the layer of the story your identity tells about what your body is, what it is doing, and what it is capable of. And this is the layer that the ancient traditions were most insistently pointing toward when they talked about practices for returning to youth. The Kaya Kalpa practices of the yogic tradition, the longevity practices of Taoist cultivation, the shamanic practices of renewal and rebirth, all of them, beneath their biological and energetic protocols, include a practice of identity dissolution and reformation, a practice of releasing the accumulated story of aging and returning to a state of identity that is not defined by the passage of time. The Taoist concept of Pu, often translated as the uncarved block, describes the state of original nature before it is shaped by experience and conditioning. It is not a state of ignorance or naivety. It is a state of potential, of openness, of the body-mind system operating from its original organizational template, rather than from the accumulated overlays of a lifetime of signals telling it what it is supposed to be. To return to the teenage body in the deepest sense is not to return to a chronological age. It is to return to the identity state of someone who has not yet accepted the story that decline is inevitable, that the body is a machine running down, that the blueprint of youth is something you left behind rather than something you carry beneath you. This is the layer where the veil is thinnest, and it is the layer that is most available to you right now, in this moment, without any technology, without any intervention, without anything other than the willingness to question the story at the deepest level. What if you are not a body that used to be young and is now aging? What if you are a field of biological potential that has been temporarily organized around a story of decline, and that story is the only thing between you and the expression of the blueprint that has never stopped being present in your cells? That is not a rhetorical question. It is a precise description of what the science, the quantum biology, the epigenetics, the biophoton research, and the ancient traditions all converge on when you follow them to their deepest layer. The blueprint is intact. The information is present. The field is coherent beneath the surface decoherence. The teenage body is not in the past. It is in the depth. And the path to it is not a protocol or a program. It is a progressive dissolution of the layers of story, conditioning, and assumed limitation that have been sitting between your awareness and that deeper layer of your own biology. Let me give you something specific to take from this transmission into your daily life. There are 3 practices that work at 3 different layers of the biological age system, and they are designed to be used together because they address different levels of the same mechanism. The first practice works at the epigenetic layer. Every morning, before you do anything else, before you check your phone, before you begin the narrative of the day, spend 5 minutes in a state of deliberate biological coherence. This means slow, rhythmic breathing, 4 counts in, hold for 4, 6 counts out. This specific pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system, reduces cortisol production, and shifts the hormonal environment of your body toward the conditions associated with repair and regeneration. It is not a relaxation technique. It is an epigenetic signal. You are sending your cells the information that the threat has passed, that the conditions for repair are present, that the programs associated with growth and restoration should be expressed. Do this every morning for 30 days and then measure how you feel. Not how you look, how you feel from the inside. Because the inside layer changes first. The second practice works at the biophoton and quantum coherence layer. Once a day for 10 minutes, practice what I am going to call coherence bathing. Find a natural environment, a park, a garden, a body of water, a patch of sky, somewhere where the light is natural and the environment is not artificial. Stand or sit in that environment and do nothing except receive. Do not exercise. Do not meditate in the formal sense. Do not try to achieve anything. Simply be in the field of the natural environment and allow your body's biophoton field to synchronize with it. There is research suggesting that natural environments emit biophoton fields with coherence patterns that the human body can entrain to, much the way a string that has begun vibrating will cause a nearby string tuned to the same frequency to begin vibrating in sympathy. The ancient practices of forest bathing, of water rituals, of sitting in sacred natural places were not superstition. They were protocols for restoring biophoton coherence through environmental entrainment. 10 minutes a day, every day. The third practice works at the identity layer, and it is the most powerful of the three. Once a week, do what Elias did, not with a letter, but with your own awareness. Spend 20 minutes in quiet and bring your attention to the question, beneath the story I am currently telling about my body, what is actually here? Not what was here. What is here? Beneath the surface narrative of your biological age, beneath the accumulated evidence of the mirror and the medical record and the cultural story about what bodies do at your age, there is a layer of biological potential that has not changed. The blueprint is intact, the information is present, the field is coherent. Can you feel it? Can you sense the layer of your body that is not aging because it is not made of time? This practice sounds like meditation and is not quite that. It is an act of biological archaeology. You are digging beneath the surface expression of your biology to find the layer beneath it that has never stopped being young. Not metaphorically. As a felt, bodily reality. Because the moment you can feel that layer, you have established a connection to it. And the connection is the first signal in a cascade of biological events that begins to move your cells toward the expression of that layer, rather than away from it. There is a fourth dimension to these three practices that is worth naming, because it is the layer that holds the other three together and determines whether they accumulate into something transformative or remain isolated techniques that produce modest results and then fade. That dimension is consistency of attention. The reason most people who encounter this information do not experience the biological changes that the research describes is not that the mechanism is not real. It is that they engage with it intermittently. They practice the breathing for a week and then forget. They spend a morning in a natural environment and then return to the artificial information field of their daily life and stay there for 3 weeks. They do the identity archaeology once and feel something shift and then do not return to it until the shift has faded and they have to start again from the surface. The epigenetic system responds to sustained signals, not to isolated ones. A single morning of coherence breathing sends a signal. 30 consecutive mornings of coherence breathing changes the baseline. The methylation patterns that regulate your cellular age respond to the average information environment over time, not to the peak experiences within it. This is why the ancient traditions embedded their practices in daily rhythms and seasonal cycles, not because daily practice was spiritually virtuous, because the biological system they were working with required sustained signaling to shift its expression. The teenage body does not return in a flash. It returns the way a signal becomes audible when you keep turning toward it, a little more present each day, a little more clearly received, until one morning you wake up and notice that something in the quality of your aliveness has changed, not dramatically, precisely. The way a room looks different when the light source shifts from fluorescent to natural. The same room, a different quality of illumination. And suddenly you can see details that were always there but had been washed out by the wrong kind of light. Now I want to address something directly because this transmission will reach some people who are carrying a specific kind of resistance to everything they have just heard. The resistance sounds like this. This is too good to be true. If this were real, everyone would know about it. The medical establishment would be teaching it. There would be no aging. This is a reasonable resistance. Let me speak to the layer beneath it. The reason this information exists at the edges of mainstream awareness rather than at the center is not conspiracy. It is not suppression. It is something more structural and more interesting. The dominant model of medicine is a surface model. It treats the body at the level of chemistry and mechanics, the outermost layers of the biological system. This is not because the deeper layers do not exist. It is because the surface model is extraordinarily effective at the surface level. It excels at acute intervention, at surgery, at infection control, at trauma management. These are surface layer problems, and the surface layer model addresses them brilliantly. The deeper layers, the epigenetic layer, the biophoton layer, the quantum coherence layer, the identity layer. These are not the territory that the surface model was designed to map. They are not ignored because they are not real. They are at the edges because the tools of the dominant model are not calibrated for them. The instruments that measure chemistry do not measure quantum coherence. The clinical trial design that tests drugs does not easily test practices. The medical model that treats disease does not have a framework for optimizing the coherence of a biological field. This is not a failure of medicine. It is a description of the limits of a surface model encountering a deeper layer. And the deeper layer does not disappear because the surface model cannot fully measure it. It waits, as it always has, beneath the surface, for the awareness that is ready to look deeper. The ancient traditions did not have the instruments of modern science, but they had something that the modern model is only beginning to rediscover. The body as an information system embedded in a field of infinite potential, capable of accessing and expressing states of biological organization that the surface story of aging says are impossible. They mapped the hidden layer not with instruments but with attention. With the sustained, disciplined, precise application of awareness to the deeper layers of their own biological experience. And the maps they drew, the practices they encoded, the traditions they preserved are still accurate, not because they are sacred, because they are precise. The teenage body you are reverting to is not a fantasy. It is a layer of your biology that has been beneath the surface story the whole time. The veil between you and it is not thick. It is made of the same thing all veils are made of, the accumulated weight of a story you accepted as the floor when it was only the surface. You are not fighting time. You are dissolving a story, and the story is already thinner than it was when you started listening to this. Let me give you the integration principle that holds everything we have covered together. The body you have been living in is the surface expression of multiple simultaneous layers of biological organization. The outermost layer is the physical tissue, the cells, the chemistry, the mechanics. Beneath that is the epigenetic layer, the system of molecular switches that determines which version of your biological potential your cells are currently expressing. Beneath that is the biophoton field, the coherent light field that organizes and coordinates your biology from beneath the tissue level. Beneath that is the quantum coherence layer, the level at which your cells participate in processes that operate by the rules of quantum mechanics rather than classical mechanics. And beneath all of these is the identity layer, the deep story of who you are and what your body is doing, which functions as the master signal that all other layers are downstream of. Aging in this framework is not a single process. It is a cascade of changes across all these layers, each layer influencing the ones above it and being influenced by the ones below it. And because the cascade runs in both directions, because the deeper layers influence the surface and the surface influences the deeper layers, the path to biological renewal is not a single intervention. It is a systematic engagement with each layer, beginning with the deepest one you can access. The deepest one you can access is not the quantum field. It is not the biophoton field. It is the identity layer, the story layer, the layer where you hold the model of what your body is and what it is capable of. Because that layer is immediately accessible to your awareness right now, in this moment, without any technology or protocol. And the moment you begin to question the surface story at the identity layer, you begin to send different signals downward through all the other layers, different signals to the quantum coherence layer, different signals to the biophoton field, different signals to the epigenetic machinery, and the epigenetic machinery, responding to the new signals, begins to shift the expression of your cells toward the patterns that were present in the body you remember. This is not a promise of a specific outcome. It is a description of a mechanism. The mechanism is real. The direction of the mechanism is toward the layer you are sending signals from, and you have more influence over the signals you send than the surface story of aging has ever allowed you to believe. Something in you already knew this. That is why you are here. You have always sensed that the surface story was not the whole story. That beneath the mirror and the medical record and the cultural narrative about what bodies do with time, there was something else. Something that did not follow the rules. Something that persisted beneath the evidence of decline. Something that felt, when you touched it in certain moments of aliveness and presence and inexplicable energy, like a layer of yourself that time had not reached. You were not imagining it. You were perceiving it accurately. You were sensing the layer beneath the surface, the layer where the blueprint is intact, the layer where the information of your teenage body is not a memory, but a present tense signal, still broadcasting, still coherent, still available to the awareness that is ready to receive it. That awareness is yours. It has always been yours, and it is more ready than it has ever been. Before we close this transmission, I want to ask you something. In the comments beneath this video, I want you to tell me one specific thing, not a general response. One specific thing. What is the layer you felt beneath the surface story of your body while you were listening? What was the moment in this transmission when something shifted, when the veil thinned, when you felt the signal of a deeper layer of your own biology? Because the community that gathers around this channel is not a passive audience. It is a field of awareness, each person in it doing the work of looking beneath the surface, and the collective act of that looking creates a coherence that amplifies what any individual can access alone. Your experience matters to this field. Share it. If this transmission is one you want to return to, bring it back in the early morning hours before the noise of the day settles in, or in the quiet before sleep, when the surface layers are thinnest and the deeper signal is most accessible. And if someone in your life has been living at the surface of the aging story, ready to sense something deeper, but without a way to reach it alone, share this with them. That act of sharing is not incidental. It creates a layer of shared depth between two awareness fields that neither could have reached as easily alone. The veil lifts differently when two people look through it together. One more thing before you go. The 3 practices I gave you, the morning coherence breathing, the daily coherence bathing in natural environments, and the weekly biological archaeology of going beneath your body's surface story. These are not a program. They are not a protocol with a defined endpoint. They are a direction. They are the direction of depth, the direction of going beneath the surface layer of your biology and finding the layer that has always been there, waiting for your awareness to look deeper. Every time you practice, you are sending a signal. Every time you question the surface story, you are thinning the veil. Every time you feel the layer of your body that time has not reached, you are establishing a connection that makes the next connection easier. This is how the teenage body returns. not in a flash of sudden transformation. In the progressive dissolution of the layers of story and signal that have been sitting between your current biological expression and the blueprint that has never stopped being present in your cells. Layer by layer, signal by signal, veil by veil, until the body you are living in and the body you remember are recognized as what they have always been. Not two different bodies separated by time. One body, expressed at two different depths. And you now know how to go to the deeper one. The veil is thinner than you think, and now you can see through it. What has been revealed in this transmission cannot be re-hidden. You have seen the layer beneath the surface story of aging. You have felt the signal of the blueprint that is still present in your cells.
You have been given the map of the hidden layers and the practices that access them. You are no longer someone who accepts the surface story as the flaw. You are someone who knows there is a depth beneath it, and you have already begun to go there. Welcome to what was always beneath everything.